So it has been my practice as a priest that whenever I am asked to do a funeral, and if it's typically at Snyder's Funeral Home, I will meet with the family as they're meeting with Tom so that I can hear all the details of the funeral arrangements and sometimes even make a helpful suggestion in the process. Unless somebody has already made all of their funeral arrangements, at some point during that meeting, Tom will take them into the casket room where he keeps the kind of the showroom. And in that showroom, there are caskets that cost $30,000 or there's some even higher than that. And yet there are some that are $3,000 or even less. And then, but I also am thinking about, I did a little research about pauper funerals, pauper, P-A-U-R-P, P-A-U-P-E-R, whatever. Poor people, indigent people. And I read that in England, what they would do is they would dig a deep hole, even as deep as like 58 feet down in the ground. And then they would put one on there and then throw some lime and then put another on there and just keep stacking them up until they got near the surface. But then in the United States, sometimes the practice is that they'll dig this horizontal trench and they'll put one in and cover that up and then put another in so they're stacked this way. But yet, in a lot of the graveyards that I visited, you know, there's these nice tombstones, and then these paupers' burial grounds, if they're a Jane Doe or a John Doe, they'll just get a little tiny stone with a number on it. And then maybe that number's in a book someplace with the name of whose that is. But if it's old enough, the records are destroyed and nobody has any idea of who was even there. When I was over in England and Scotland and visited a lot of the parish churches, there was the graveyards around the churches, but you know, in the United States, some of the oldest tombstones are in the northeast and south and so on along the coast, the earliest parts of the colonies, and they date back, some of them, to 1700s. But when you get beyond that, if it's limestone or sandstone, the numbers and the letters are pretty much all washed away. Only maybe in some of the churches over there and maybe some churches here where somebody is actually buried in the church with a stone, you know, in the church, might it be older than 1700? I was just stunned to go around these churchyards and just to see all the stones that just had no writing on them at all. And some of them were just stacked up around the church. And in one of the churches, their outer boundary or property, they had just stacked them up. And at the same church, they had taken old stones that the writing was gone on, and they had used them to make a sidewalk. So I was thinking of that the saying from Proverbs, the rich and the poor have in common, what they have in common is the Lord is the maker of them all. But I also am thinking about in the burial service near the end where it says, "For so did you ordain when you created me, saying, you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust." Expensive caskets and tombstones don't score you points in heaven. You don't go into heaven and Jesus greets you and say, "Man, you picked out an excellent casket, and boy, that gravestone, it was just to die for," literally. Dead is dead, regardless if you're rich or you're poor. Rich and poor alike are going to stand in front of the judgment seat of Christ. And I was thinking also of in one of the Gospels, I think it's Luke, where there's a publican, a tax collector, very elite Jewish person. And then he's standing there on his knees and he's saying, Lord, I keep all the commandments, and I do my tithing and all of this. And there was another poor tax collector guy over here, and he's just beating his chest. He can't even look up to heaven. And the guy over here, he's saying, I'm just so glad I'm not like that guy over there. I'm so much better than that guy. I want to tell you a story about a gentleman from my hometown. His name was Red. I don't know what his last name was. I just knew him as Red. Red the plumber. Red was a functioning alcoholic, meaning that he was an alcoholic, but he could still do his job, and he was a plumber. So if we ever had a plumbing problem at our house, and it was something that my father couldn't fix, he'd say, Alan, go get Red the plumber. But when I was a little kid, he lived within a block in this old shack of a house that eventually got tore down, and then he moved out to an abandoned house out in the country. And he would always, whenever we had to go get him, he would come in, he would do the job, and really he did an excellent job. He was, you wouldn't want a better plumber to do your work. In fact, when I was 13 years old during the summer, our pipes just started leaking like crazy, old cast iron pipes. And so my father wasn't able, but I was able-bodied enough that I ended up having to go down in the crawl space of our house and dig up or expose the old cast iron pipes. And then Red came with new pipes, and he just replaced all the pipes in our house and did an excellent job. And then I remember it was like maybe during the blizzard of '78 when it got down to like 20 below zero, and even though we had insulated the pipes, one of them burst that led to like the outside spigot. And poor Red, just came right away. He was down there in that just ice freezing cold water and repaired that broken pipe. But what Red got paid, he bought a little bit of food for himself. He was stinky and dirty and all of that, and he had a gazillion cats. So, he'd buy a little bit of food for himself. He'd buy plenty of cat food for his cats, and then he would, buy his whiskey. But he was just one of those people that, even though you could think all the worst things about him, he was somebody to be remembered. He was somebody to be respected because he was such a great plumber and a nice guy to talk to. I mean, I would sit there for hours, watching him do his work, and he would chat to me and with me and answer all my stupid little questions, that I might have. So also in Proverbs, it says, a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches. And, Red is one of those guys that had a good name in town, and he didn't have all the riches. He had everything he wanted in his rather simple life. Which, we can have all the riches in the world, but that, is the old saying of money doesn't always buy happiness. And there's that song, it'll buy me a boat, and a truck for it, and all of that stuff. In our baptismal covenant, we're told to seek and serve Christ in all persons and respect the dignity of every person and every human being. In our gospel story today, we have two people. We have this Gentile woman whose child has a demon, and then we have this deaf man who's a stutterer. The elite Jewish people, they didn't have any respect or dignity for Gentiles whatsoever. They called them dogs, and I was reading that the Greek word that Jesus used for dog was like your little household pet. But when the Jewish elite would call Gentiles dogs, there was another word for dog. That was your mongrel. That was your wild dog, that couldn't be tamed. And it was a sign of disrespect. And the Jews also, these elite Jews, had no respect for people who had disabilities. because they still believed in that idea that God, that if you were healthy and you had wealth, that God had blessed you. But if you had a disability or you were poor, that you had been cursed. So people were either blessed or cursed in their eyes. But Jesus crossed that boundary of Gentile and disability. And he showed respect towards these people. And he helped them out. And he restored their dignity and restored this daughter to life. God doesn't look at people and see rich or poor. God looks at people and he looks at the poor, and what he sees is he sees people in need, people that need help. And Jesus says, who's going to help those people? James says it's not enough to say to somebody, oh, I'll pray for you and I'll pray for your needs. That if we have the faith, that we will try to find some way to help that person in need. I've mentioned it before that I have this prayer that I pretty much say every time after a vestry meeting. That, I say, as we go out into the world, out into the mission field, that we ask God to help us keep our eyes open, our ears open, and our hearts open to see the need about us in the world, and to find the courage and the will to meet that need, wherever and whatever that may be. Jesus tells us that we will always have the poor with us. But Jesus gave us an example, like today, of how to help people that are in need. And sometimes we have to be creative about that, or we might have to get other people to help us, or we might have to refer them to somebody, to a social service agency that can do something to help them out. We can't solve world hunger. We can't solve all the poverty in the world. But maybe we can help one child of God to improve their life in some way. Because I know, at least for myself, that someday I'm going to stand before Jesus, and I want to hear those sweet words that says to some, well done, good and faithful servant. And hopefully we all hear that. Amen.